we need to be thinking a little bit about prevention, and also just for awareness. So for those of you who, a couple of you have backgrounds in psychology, but remember Hawthorne effect? So you might experience a little bit of this today. This is sort of like the medical school disease where you're reading, the book and it's like, oh my God, I have that. And my left foot tingles and now I have some horrible disease. So what happens is you get into these, there's, as you study something and become more aware of it, you start to see it more. And when we open up avenues, say for like a new type of category of mishap, we'll see a spike in that because now people are really paying attention to that. And eventually, as it comes into the general knowledge base, it sort of evens out. That's called a Hawthorne effect. And you might feel that a little bit as you go through the class. That's okay, that's good, that means you're thinking about it. So we're going to talk about human error. The model uses the term human error. I don't want you to be afraid of saying error or mistake or failure or human error. It's part of this model to do that. That does not mean it was willful or intentional. It doesn't mean the person was stupid if they made an error. It doesn't mean anything like that. It's just for various reasons, people do commit errors. And we want to understand what's setting that up, and we want to understand what perpetuates it, and we want to understand how to stop them. It doesn't mean that people don't care. It doesn't mean, again, that they've screwed up. It's really just part of human behavior. HVACs is used in lots and lots of places. These are logos of different companies that use HVACs. The model is a model that's been widely used. It's used all throughout DoD, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. It's used in almost every other westernized Air Force like Singapore and Canada and Israel and India and places like that. It's used at Disney. It's used at Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, and TSB, Embry-Riddle, lots and lots of places like that. So part of why we want to use the model here is because the industry is using it, and ultimately we want to be able to compare. So we want to be able to compare fixed wing in DoD to fixed wing here at NASA. We want to compare rotary wing to rotary, UAS or UAV to UAS, UAV here. We can compare if we are speaking the same language. And so by doing it this way, it would allow us to look beyond NASA across other industries. And that's part of our hope and why we're going to do this. The theoretical basis, for those of you who like reading, James Reason has written 2 books. The first one is about human error. That was written in 1990. He goes on to write another book. There's actually 3 books that he's written. One of them is about taking that and applying it to organizations. There's also a guy named Jans Rasmussen who you just, in terms of knowing names and theoretical models of human factors, or early on he gets into what are called skill-based errors, rule-based errors, knowledge-based errors. Those each mean something different, right? And you're going to hear about those when you get into what are called acts, when you start talking about acts, because it's sort of like in medicine. Why do you diagnose somebody with, whether they have cancer or whether they have appendicitis? Because the fixes for those 2 conditions, although somebody might show up with belly pain, is different, right? And so the fixes to these kinds of errors are different. This is more about training. This is more about supervision. This is more, there's different ways that we mitigate different kinds of errors, and that's why we want to categorize them as best we can appropriately. There's also, you're going to hear a little bit about the Shell model. The Shell model was done by Edwards. It's a long time ago, and the SHEL refers to software, hardware, environment, and liveware. Now, since this was originally developed, and the idea is all of these interact in various ways. The person is always interacting with another person or another piece of hardware or something in the environment. There's been a lot of new shell models. There's Shell D, there's Shell SW. There are applications of Shell, which are all good, and you may see some of those as you go about your careers. But it started with, the first version was a lot more simple. I think I'm going to have to turn this over to you. And here's the discussion about shall. But my big takeaway for you is, I think this is really interesting, right? I mean, this, to me, human factors is fun. And I don't see it as, I'm a psychologist by training. So I think people are the most interesting part of the whole thing. That's just my bias, and I think the differences of people are the fun part, and this is where we get to see, how do we make the best, how do we take people and get the best out of them? How do we come together with all those differences that, this is America, all our differences make us stronger when we come together and when we share those ideas. And so this is the human factor stuff is how this plays out in operations, in how we conduct business. And there's ways of looking at this. The first way to learn this is in when something's gone wrong and identifying where those things have happened. But then we can look at it and say, how do we get peak performance all the time? How can we build systems where we're immune or where we're resilient? And that'll be the next course that you come to, Human Factors 2.0, where we really start talking about building resilient systems, knowing the human envelope. I mean, there's just a certain amount of capability, but knowing the human envelope, what can we do with that? And that's what you're gonna get in terms of just looking at human behavior, human error, human performance via this model that we've adapted, the system called HVACs, and the NASA version of it is very similar to original HVACs. So I know the HVACs creators, Doug Wiegman and Scott Chappell, they have basically blessed this. We've interacted on this. The difference in this and standard HVACs is we've started to add in space things. So HVACs should apply to any industry, hospitals, railway systems, all of that. But it doesn't, because all of the ways that humans can fail or make mistakes are pretty much the same whether you're in an operating room or on a flight line. I mean, it's the same kinds of things, communication, supervision, those kinds of things, but it's a little bit different if we're on Mars and there's no way of communicating for maybe, I don't know, a period of time. Or if you're in 0G and you're trying to reach for something, or those kinds of things. So we've sort of tried to add in some space, truly unique categories, and that's how we get to NASA HVACs, and you guys are the first people who are getting this course. So this is gonna be it. I'll be checking in when I can on you, have a lot of fun. Nick is a maintainer, a Marine, former Marine and maintainer, so he can handle anything. Charlie Dissinger has been around the agency for a long time as one of our wise guys at Marshall, and I'm very appreciative for you to be here. Rob Moreland works with the chief engineer. He's one of Ralph's guys at headquarters, and so he's a believer in how human factors affects engineering and the systems as we build them. And Dr. Alexander, Tiffany is here. Thank you, Tiffany, for setting up the room and all of the logistics, the way the course got set up, the way we got your Saturn credit, all of those kinds of things that Tiffany has been responsible for. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm out. I'll see you guys later.